So yesterday I got the radiator and hoses and belts and everything done on this motor. Came out here this morning and started pouring some water in it, and you can see where I had a little leak right here. So I put some pepper in it. Now that used to be the fix for a radiator leak back in the old days. You can see it's still dripping a little. But the idea of pepper is that pepper swells up when it gets wet, and that the pressure would push it to the hole, and it would hit that hole, and because it was swollen up, it would stop the hole up. It's actually leaking from up here. Now another fix, back when we used to race, if we had one leaking like this, what I would do is take a pair of needle nose pliers and reach inside this core and twist that and crimp it off, and maybe twist it down here. That way I would take this, each one of these lines that you see here, that's a tube with water running through it, and these little fins with air cools that, and you can twist one, and if you look up in here, there's a bunch of them across there. So if I was to twist this one, the other tubes would still be carrying water. I thought I'd try the old pepper trick first, and I got 3 gallons in here, and I might put a little bit more. I might put it in here till it fills this up, and then put the cap on and then crank it. Now what the cap does, generally these run 14 pounds per square inch. This one may be 16, so this is a 16 pound per square inch radiator cap. This may be a little higher. Well, this came off the Rambler, which was up north. Sometimes the cars up north run a little higher temperature, so that might be why that's a little higher. But what I'm going to do is fill it up with water. I'm going to run it. Once I'm convinced it's not leaking, I'll either drain the water out, or I'll drain it down enough to put a little antifreeze in it. But I want to run it till it gets hot, and I could do that today if I get it warmed up enough to get up to operating temperature, and I could go ahead and adjust my valves today. I'm going to go get another gallon of water and pour as much in there as I can, and we'll crank it up and let it run a while, watch the temperature gauge. have is a fan. Now let's talk about that. Normally on your car, you're going to have a fan pulling air through the radiator. Well, I don't have a fan on this one. And there's a couple of options for fans. There's a mechanical fan, which is basically just a fan blade that sits right here and is driven off your water pump. And then there's an electric fan that people put on there that's like electrically activated. It has a sensor on it that tells it when to turn on and turn off. The Studebaker has an electric fan. The Rat Rod and the Rambler both have manual fans, which I prefer. I don't like to pull up to a car show and have someone hear the fan running. There's something about that. Well, they didn't have electric fans on cars when I was a kid, so something about that just don't sit right with me, but that's just my prejudice. So, oh, notice my gas can is getting empty there too, so I burned up all the gas in that can. But we got the pressure up on this, and I noticed it's stopped leaking. It did leak a little more, but not an awful lot. I would not add water to one when it's hot, because you can crack your heads by putting cold water in a hot engine. And this is a hot engine. I think it was up to about 220 when I cut it off. And it's up to about 230 now. They always get a little hotter. Right after you cut them off, the temperature will go up a little more. So that's not unusual. So I may just let it sit and cool down. In fact, I did notice this hose. Remember how it was all kinked up? Well, the temperature brought the hose back to a more normal size. I still got a little kink right here, but I could probably shorten that hose and get that kink pulled out of it. I did notice it gotten up high enough to get a little water to come out of the overflow valve, so that's good. So what I may do is just let it cool down and then drain the water that's in here out, and then come back tomorrow and work on, I was talking about putting an additional bolt in here, and I may come back tomorrow and do that. Another option, there's not a bolt right here. In other words, this bolt here just goes through this and holds that. But if I had a threaded bolt, one that was threaded all the way down, I could run a bolt down and put a threaded bolt right there. So I think probably my best option would be to come in here and take a grinder and carefully grind off a little bit of this, and then put a bolt through there with a big tap, a big washer on the end, and I could basically get a bolt into that water pump that would also hold this and keep it from vibrating so much. So that's a couple of cool things, a couple of things I could do. This radiator has a radiator drain on the bottom of it. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm going to let it cool down a little bit before I try that. Oh, the other thing is the timing was way off on this. You notice I was playing around with it to get the idle right, and it was idled wrong, so I twisted it around. I've got it right to the point where this thing here touches that bolt. Well, that bolt is not anything that's necessary. All that's doing is stopping up a vacuum hole. And that vacuum hole would be used for something like, well, anything I need vacuum for. Like on this car, I'm going to be putting a vacuum booster on my brake, which might need some vacuum to operate, so I may wind up using that hole for that. But if you had a situation like this and you needed it to not be a problem, a lot of times you can pick the distributor up and lift it and pull it one cylinder and put it back down, and get this turned a little further away than where it is. But, that's all manageable. I think it might have run enough to burn the oil off that I had smoking over here. So that's good. I'm altogether satisfied with it. I'll be a little more satisfied once I get it to idle exactly the way I want it to. I do want to also clean that carburetor. The carburetor looks like it's not terribly old, but it was really dirty when I bought it, and I just slammed it on there and cranked it with it, and it would be good to take that off and clean it. Of course, when I lift this engine, I'm going to be lifting it by a carburetor plate, so that'll come off anyway. I do have, we were talking about this little thing leaking, I do have a bolt here that is really not the best bolt for it, but I put it on here because it had this little lip where I could hang this carburetor spring. And eventually I want to put something else up here. I've got a bolt hole here, so I may put a bolt with a little finger that reaches around here that I can hook the carburetor spring to on that. So yeah, all in all, I feel like I'm in a good place with this. I feel fine about just letting it cool down, draining the water out. I may just leave the water out for today and then come back tomorrow and refill it. I did notice, I might have mentioned that my radiator leak seems to have stopped. And what I might do is just take that fan right up there, set it right here on a couple of blocks of wood, have it blowing through here. Use that fan as a kind of a temporary fan to get air going through this. But I got some other things that need to be done too, so what I might do is pull this radiator off. I probably will, in order to give me better access to that right there that I'm going to be working on. I don't have any leaks here, and I may have a tiny little leak left there, but eventually what I might do is pop that thing off and put an additional little finger thing on this for my carburetor spring, and then I won't need to be using that funny bolt on that thing right there. So, I think I can just leave this, go in the house. You see the temperature's already coming down, so I'll let the temperature fall back down, and then we'll address we'll address a lot of things here. But progress is being made. We weren't here much this morning. This was a short day. We actually went and danced at an old folks' home. Me and Honey Baby got involved. We actually met each other at a dance up in Maine 15 years ago or more, and maybe more than that. Probably was more than that, because we met each other and then broke up, so it would have been more like 25 years ago, I guess, maybe. Yeah, could have been. Anyway, we came down here, we met some people to dance. They had a class that you could take, some dance lessons, and we started taking dance lessons with them. Then we went out today and did like a Halloween dance at an old folks home. Us and about a dozen other people, and that was fun. And you know, when you do something like that, you're making a contribution back to the neighborhood when you do something to entertain people who are in a environment like that. So I don't mind doing that. In fact, I feel really good about doing something like that, having the opportunity to give something back to some folks that appreciate it. I used to go to old folks' homes and play my banjo pretty regular, and I might do that again at some point if I ever feel like I get good enough at banjo playing to do that. One thing about playing for old folks is, you know, most of them ain't got nowhere to go, so you've got a captive audience, and you know, if you lose the audience, most of the time you lose them because they go to sleep on you, which is, you know, better than having throwing things at you. I've performed to audiences where they were encouraged to throw things at me before. That was back in my slam poetry days, and I didn't mind that so much, but I was younger then and could run and dodge and duck faster. So in my old age, probably playing to old folks is a better idea. All right, so what I might do, before I stop, go ahead and get that fan down and set it right in front of here, and then let this cool down, and then crank it back up and see if that fan will give me enough air to keep this from overheating. And when the temperature comes down, I can also take off the radiator cap and see if I need to put more water in the radiator. Sometimes you fill the radiator up and you run it, and then you need to add a little bit more, but you don't want to do that while it's hot. So, yeah, I'll take that fan down. And the other thing the fan was doing is kind of helping blow some of the car fumes out of the garage, make it easier to breathe in here. I seem to be less immune to car fumes than I was when I was younger. might be that I'm not as foolish as I once was. I'll turn y'all off while I mess around with things here a bit, and then we'll come back.